Hi everyone, Brad from MJB Engineering. Haven't done a video for a while, so let's jump straight in. This here is a mixer, and this is photographed at the customer's premises. It's a Sottoriva, and it is a spiral mixer, but it's also tilting with a removable bowl. So here's just a few photos of the general condition as received in comparison to the size of a transit van there. Right, well this mixer has just arrived, and it is an Italian made machine. I believe it's 2000 it was made, and it's a bit of a lump. With the bowl it weighs 1.5 tonne. I reckon without the bowl as it is here it probably weighs about 1200 kilos. That's a full-size transit van for reference, so it's quite a lump. Now the problem is the customer has already had an engineering company change the seals here. And what's actually happening is it's still leaking oil. Quite an involved process to get into the gearbox on this. It also has a hydraulic oil leak because this is a tilting mixer and the head actually lifts up and the bowl is on wheels and you can wheel the bowl away. So there's two hydraulic cylinders in there, and we actually have an oil leak somewhere. So the hydraulic oil pump is that one down the bottom. Obviously that's your main motor pump, main motor for the spindle for the drive, and I've already removed the belts. If you listen closely over the noise of the pigeon in the background, there's quite a bit of backlash in them gears. So this machine is 25 years old, probably due some maintenance. I don't think it's seen much cleaning, so we get cracking on this. We get this pulley off. Probably might have to set up the A-frame to take some of the elements away, and we'll go from there. Right, the forklift is currently down the road being used to move a machine. So what we've actually done is just used the pallet stacker to lift this pulley off because it wasn't tight on this shaft at all really. So that's lifted the pulley. We can now move this away, remove the key, start getting some of these caps removed. Now there's obviously an oil leak here on this cap, so this cap either needs a gasket or some flange sealant. There's also an oil leak from this screw hole, so that must need some flange sealant as well, or a new gasket. I will then begin, actually, before we remove them, probably cleaning the top of this so that we do not get any debris in the gearbox. And then we can move on to the next step, which will be unbolting the gearbox and lifting the lid off and seeing what is actually holding the spiral shaft in. So to clean this, we're going to start with the Interflon Eco Degreaser. That's a food safe, fairly environmentally friendly degreaser. No safety warnings, doesn't matter if you get it on your hands, etc. So we'll start with this. We'll give it a brush after it's sat for a minute, and then we will proceed. Right, so we've cleaned the top off now, it's nice and clean. But you'll notice, looking by the paint around here, this gearbox has not been apart recently. So that tells me that the spindle, or the spiral shaft, must be able to come out through here. Or you release something here and it can drop out the bottom, because they've not bothered taking this gearbox lid off, which is fine. But obviously, what with a leaking seal here and a leak on here as well, maybe someone should have investigated if there was seals there that needed doing. But we'll get to that bridge when we come to it. Next job is to take these off. Right, so we have removed this cover. No flange sealant there, no O-ring, no gasket, and the bearing does not look very new. Either that or there's some serious contamination in this gearbox, because that is full of crud. That is full of grit and rust and dirt, and that is not good. So if that is a new bearing they've put in there, it ain't a new bearing anymore. Right, so we've wiped some of that corrosion out that was in with that bearing. You can see it is pretty brown. You can see there's actually corrosion on the bearing, you know, staining. So whether they've put a new old stock bearing in or what, I don't know. But we're going to quickly whip the tool off, the spiral, that's the tool, and drop the shaft out, and we'll see what the deal is. Just removed the tool. They take a 14mm hex, and you can just tell by the fact that they haven't even cleaned these that's not really standard practice. They're pretty filthy. Anyways, the other thing to note is there's 6 sets of hole there, so that's interesting. Never normally see that. So you can actually clock this in a couple of different positions, this spiral, but shouldn't really matter. Okay, so now we're ready to undo this one here, and should be able to knock the spiral out. Right, there's more of that horrendous brown filth, whatever it is, oil and fretting and rust and grease and whatever. That's the gearbox with a big reduction. So we'll try and figure out how this comes apart now. Right, so it's coming quickly apparent that this machine has not had the bearings replaced. I've just pulled this bearing off here. There's more of this brown grease under the bearing. That was so tight on there, you couldn't knock the shaft out through the thing without pulling the bearing. So we've now pulled the bearing off with a separator. That's around here. So we've removed that bearing there. As you can see, there's a load of discoloration to the bearing. It's not new. So now we should be able to knock the shaft out, and that should come out from underneath then. Right, I'm just going to impact this. Try and stop that from... So which needs... I've just marked this up, and obviously this does look like this could have been off because there is a break in the paint and that. But why put the bolts back that filthy? Like the guy said, this has only been run for 5 minutes since this was redone. Like, it's just fucking poxy, isn't it? Anyway, we're going to whip this off now, and that should then allow this bearing that's in here to drop out. So we'll see how we go. Nice box of rubbish underneath to catch it. Big old bearing. There we go. He's almost there. Oh, he's almost there. Okay, so bearing and shaft are out. Obviously, there's still a bearing in that lower bearing pocket there, bearing seat. So we'll drain this oil off, give this a good clean out because that's not been done, and then we'll go from there. And it smells foul, this oil as well. It's had water in it at some point. Right, so this is the bearing retainer seal plate, bearing and spiral shaft out of the machine. And you see we've bent our little nut a little bit. A little bolt with the centre of the, hitting it with a hammer. Anyway, so this bearing does look newish, but I don't know, hard to say how they would have changed that without pulling the top bearing out, and why wouldn't they change the top bearing? It don't make sense. That big bearing gear there is bigger than this hole for this bearing, so they wouldn't have pulled the whole lot out of the bottom. So I really don't know what's happened there. We've got to pull this key out here using the slide hammer again, and then we can try and get a separator around this and press this apart. Right, here we go, just pressing it out now, just using the actual seal plate, the bearing cap, to press the bearing off, because I couldn't really get the puller in there. There weren't quite enough room for it to get the separator in. That's not taking a lot of pressure now. I'm going to swap to low pressure. Oh, that's alright. So I'm going to try and catch this rather than it fall in the box. So he said. Right, so here we've just removed the electrical cabinet and we're trying to track down the oil leak from the cylinders. And these two photos here are showing the condition of the shaft, the spiral shaft, corrosion on the seal area and galling on the bearing area. Right, so this is looking at the bearing here from the mixer, and you can see it's double angular contact, or double row angular contact bearing. 130 OD, 60 ID, 54 mil deep. So if we take this off, and this is a no brand, can't see any markings on it. I think it's got a number somewhere, but it doesn't refer to the bearing number. So we've got a seal here. Oh, it's loose. And what they've done is they've put two seals back to back, so to try and seal on that damaged shaft. So the problem is that has been pressing against the inner cage of that bearing, which has obviously deformed this, made it spin. It's then deformed this lower one as well. So by deforming the lower one as well, it's then able to leak lots of oil. And if I flip this over, you can see, so this is like the bearing retaining cap. There's actually like a material seal here as well that's very worn. So this is must be like a felt seal or something. So yeah, we might have to look at seeing if we can replace that somehow. Alright, we've got this cylinder out of this big mixer here. We've actually got a persistent leak around this joint here. So I'm not sure if there's a copper washer in there or what. There's also an ever so slight leak from the seals. So I think it'll probably want resealing. The hoses obviously need replacing. So we've marked all them up. We'll get them made today. And just draining the oil out of it. And we'll get it off to the firm that's going to repair it. Okay, so we've just picked up our shaft. That's come back from hard chrome. As you can see, they've done the bearing diameter and the seal diameter there. It was the seal diameter that was obviously letting the oil past, but the bearing diameter had become galled up where the bearing had been pressed on incorrectly. So what we're going to do is we've just installed a new seal into the cover or the gland here. This obviously retains the shaft and the bearing up inside the machine. Well, it retains the bearing in the machine. So we've just put a bit of food safe grease on there. We're going to just pop this on the shaft. Oh, we're going to clean the shaft first. So let's do that first. Let's just clean the shaft, make sure there's no contamination on there. Then we can assemble the seal. The seal's brand new. It's got a little bit of grease. It'll just make sure there's no grit that's going to be running around with this shaft. And then we will heat the shaft up. That's the old bearing now, so we've got a new one of them. We'll heat the bearing up, drop it on the shaft. Shaft is nice and cool, it's room temperature. And that way we don't have to use the press to press it all together. We can then heat the housing up on the actual mixer itself with a hot air gun, just to warm it slightly, make it grow. We can then pull the shaft up into the mixer. Right, you can see we've set up a piece of 10mm stud in here. We're using this gear, this old gear, to bridge the hole, and we've got just a seal install tool, just so we can use a 10mm nut. We have put the new shaft, or the chrome shaft with the new bearing, all clean in the ball. So now we're just winding it up into the head of the machine. Once that's done, we can install the bolts from underneath to hold the bearing cap on, and then it can't come apart. So the bearing has been heat shrunk onto the shaft, so that was a painless process. Just heated the bearing, shaft was cool, and yeah, so we'll wind this up now. It's going to be a bit of a slow process, but once that's done, we can actually take the lid back off and start reinstalling this gear. This gear obviously needs cleaning first. and put all the other bits of the gearbox back together as well. Okay, so you can see we've cleaned out the internal surfaces of the gearbox, because this was black before. Managed to clean the majority of the dirt off. There's some stubborn stuff, but that'll do. We've got that little pocket clean there, which is a bit of a sod to clear out. Obviously the shaft's in, the bearing's in. Just got to clean that disc there, which goes on here, and probably take that plug out again, because there's some crap that's gone down in there. So that's now clean enough. I'm going to start reassembling, but first I need to clean that gear. It was already a little bit rusty when we pulled it out, and obviously the oxidation has occurred in the workshop, so that needs a good clean with Scotch-Brite, and then we can actually get this remounted. As you can see, that turns quite nicely, and then we'll go from there. So I'll get on with this, I suppose. Right, so we're just looking at this. This is the driving gear for the gearbox, so the pulley mounts here. As you can see, it's got some corrosion that this is just splash oiled, so you've got quite a bit of pitting and corrosion on the top side of this bearing, and same down on the bottom. You've got a fair bit of corrosion around the bottom, and I've tried to wash this out, but where this sits in a sump, all of the crap has settled in this bearing. And if I give it a spin there, and bear in mind I've just lubricated this up with some what do you call it, brake cleaner, which should have washed out a lot of the shit. It sounds awful, and there is actually a bit of play in that as well. Yeah, so I think we're gonna have to switch that. I've got one of these already from another job left over, so we'll put a new double angular contact on, so that's a 3309, and I think this is going to be a 62208 or something. Can't remember now, just looked it up, but it's not standard bearing, it's a funny width, 23mm. So we'll get these off and we'll go from there. Just to have a closer look at this bearing, so we can see that it has seated all the way up into this shoulder here. Obviously we can see it's a FAG, Germany, and I believe it's a, was it a 62? I can't remember now what it was. There it is. It's a, sorry, not a 62. It's a 3312 double angular contact, and the bearing to go on top is a bit of a funny one. It's a 4209, I think. Anyways, so yeah, just a closer look at that shaft now. It's back in with. Here we are, just looking at the gear now. So it has got some pitting from where it was in the gearbox, obviously not completely submerged. But that's only on the face of it. The actual teeth are in excellent condition. So we've given this a very light Scotch-Brite, just with some grey Scotch-Brite, which is the most mild one. Just to clean off any loose oxidation. The pitting we're not too worried about really. Once this has got oil on it, it isn't going to rust any further. So yeah, there's just a bit of corrosion down in the bottom, just some dust, but I'm really not too concerned because it's better than it was. It was literally very, very filthy, as I think you saw before. So we've just cleaned these holes out. We're now on the hot plate. We're trying to bring it up to about 150. This is just going to make it that bit easier to slide onto the shaft outside, which, you know, will just aid putting it back together. We do have to, I need to check, I don't think it's going to matter, get the other gear shaft in, but I believe this goes first. I need to check back over the disassembly pictures, and then we can start zipping this together, get the bearing on top, get the driver shaft in, which goes at the back. Yeah, but I've got to get a bearing for that back one because I don't think I have one, so yes. I kept looking at the photos of when I took this machine apart, and something, whoops, wasn't adding up. Where's that just gone? So I want to see it. We had this part here, and when I took this apart, so I left it sort of in the bottom, and I was undecided where it went. And what we had was a massive gap under here. And so what I've done is had a look on the bottom of this after I've cleaned this up. You can actually see it's got 2 marks, and there's the mark from the keyway, and there's the corresponding 2 holes and the mark from the keyway. So it's quite clear that whoever put this back together really quite fucking fucked this up, really. Excuse my language. But yeah, so we're just heating the bearing up, then the bearing will go on here. So that this way, when this is now in the right place, and I've got pictures, this weren't here before. Now when this is in the right place, when you tighten the bearing down, it'll tighten up against this. The inner ring of the bearing will tighten up against this and tighten up against the gear, so the inner ring stays turning. This is why we had a load of fretting corrosion on it before, because a moron had put it together. So whoever done this up in Scotland should be ashamed of themselves, really, because that's just stupid. And it's all because, I know what it is, they didn't take the lid of the gearbox off. They cheated, and they knocked all this down through without taking the lid of the gearbox off. So they didn't have a clue what was going on in here. Lucky that when they put this back together, that this didn't get knocked in between these teeth. It's lucky it just spun off and was lying in the bottom, because if that would have gone in there, this machine would be trashed. Right, that's the bearing we've took off. That one's actually got a polymer cage, interestingly. We're replacing it with this Koyo, Japan. Really nice bearing. Let's try it. Is it going to go? Yep. Easy as that when you heat the bearings up. It really is easy. So, let's get this on. This is the thrust race. I knew that was going to do that. Right, so we'll tap that on with the appropriate tool. Right, we're all installed, ready to put the lid on using the Loctite 574 flange sealant. Didn't need to go around the holes, but why not? But yeah, so that's ready to be all buttoned up now, and then we can fill it with oil. Here she is, running, nice and quiet. Bit of a wobble on the pulley actually, which is a little bit odd, but nothing major. Slight knocking noise, not too sure what the cause of that is. Might even be the motor actually. Anyways, running nice and smooth, no oil leaks so far. I'm going to let this run for 5 minutes and stop it, and then run it for about 10 minutes at high speed, which would probably be about a normal mix, maybe a bit longer, maybe 15 minutes for at the higher speed. So we'll let this run at 5 at the low, and then 15 minutes say at the high speed, and we'll see what unfortunately, I didn't get any more footage, but we tested this machine a couple of times over the next week. It was collected yesterday, and there's been 0 leaks, so the customer's very happy. Just leave you with some pictures of the dog now. Thanks for watching, really appreciate it. Sorry there's not been a video for about 3 months, and hopefully I'll try and get some more bits videoed for future content. I'll let you know how the customer gets on with the machine, but yeah, we're happy with how that one's turned out, and no hydraulic leaks either from the ram, so good stuff. See you on the next one.